28 days. That's all that separated me from becoming Mrs. Chen Wei Long, wife to the heir of the Chen family dynasty. The entire city knew our names were written together in gold on the imperial registry. Every merchant, every official, every gossiping housewife understood that I was about to enter one of the most powerful families in the capital as the legitimate wife of their only heir. But this morning, everything changed in the span of a single heartbeat. My handmaid burst into my chambers, tears streaming down her face like a river breaking through a dam, choking on words that would shatter the careful future I'd been building for months. Miss, the Chen family, they're holding a wedding. Today. Right now. My hand stilled over the silk I'd been embroidering, a phoenix design meant for my own wedding pillows. The needle hung suspended between my fingers and the fabric, a single moment frozen in time. A wedding? Young Master Chen Wei Long is marrying Lady Mei Yun, his brother's widow. The words tumbled out of her mouth in a desperate rush, as if speaking them quickly would somehow soften their impact. The needle slipped from my fingers, landing soundlessly on the thick carpet. Lady Mei Yun, my future husband's sister-in-law, widowed barely 15 months ago when Chen Wei Long's older brother died on the northern border, cut down by plague while defending our empire's frontier. Old Mistress Chen announced it this morning, my maid continued, her voice breaking with every syllable. She says Lady Mei is with child, alone and vulnerable. That Wei Long, as her brother-in-law, must fulfill his duty and take her as a secondary wife to protect her honor and give the child a father. A secondary wife. To protect her honor. I stared at my reflection in the polished bronze mirror that stood in the corner of my room. My face looked strange to me, too calm, too still, like ice forming over deep water that hid dangerous currents beneath. 15 months since his brother died. 15 months. And she was pregnant. With a child that supposedly needed protecting, needed legitimizing, needed a father. The arithmetic was simple. Even a child could do it. But apparently, the Chen family thought me too stupid or too weak to count. I stood abruptly, walking to my wardrobe with measured steps. My maid grabbed my sleeve, her fingers clutching desperately at the silk. Miss, what are you doing? You can't possibly be thinking of. I pulled out the crimson phoenix gown my mother had left me before she died, the one she'd spent her final months embroidering with her own hands, meant for my wedding day. The embroidery alone had taken master craftsman 3 years to complete after her death, following her exact specifications. Golden phoenixes danced across silk so fine it seemed to shimmer with its own internal light, as if the birds themselves were alive and in flight. We're going to the wedding, I said simply, my voice steady and clear. Miss, you can't. They'll humiliate you. The whole city will laugh. It'll be walking straight into their trap. I met her eyes in the mirror as I began unpinning my simple daily hair arrangement. No, shall you? I'm going to congratulate them. Congratulate them? She looked at me as if I'd lost my mind, as if grief had driven me to madness. Of course. I selected my most elaborate hairpin from my jewelry box, a phoenix in flight, its wings spread wide and set with rubies that caught the light like drops of fresh blood. My betrothed is getting married and becoming a father. How could I, his official fiancé, not attend such a momentous and joyous occasion? What kind of wife would I be if I didn't celebrate his happiness? The words tasted like poison on my tongue, but my voice remained sweet as honey. Xiao Yu's hands trembled as she helped me dress, her fingers fumbling with the complicated fastenings. Miss, the Chen family is too powerful. Your father is the prime minister, your brother commands the city garrison. They should handle this. Let them confront the Chens, demand explanations, call for justice. For you to go there yourself, all alone, it's just asking for humiliation. And let them prepare pretty lies? I smiled at her in the mirror, and she actually flinched at what she saw in my expression. No, Xiao Yu. The Chen family has already planted themselves firmly on the moral high ground. They're waiting up there with their righteous excuses, ready to explain how they had no choice, how circumstances forced their hand, how they're actually the victims of fate. I lifted my arms so she could arrange the outer robe properly. They expect the Chen family to come storming to their gates, demanding justice, making a scene. They want us to cry and scream and threaten. And then they'll play the role of noble martyrs, forced by cruel circumstance to do the honorable thing despite how it looks. They'll say they're protecting a widow and an innocent child. They'll make themselves look like saints while painting us as unreasonable, jealous, and cruel. The heavy gown settled around me like armor, like war gear, like the costume for a performance I was about to give. So I won't give them what they expect. I won't arrive crying and making demands. I'll give them something far worse. I turned to face her fully, and in the morning light streaming through the windows, the golden phoenixes on my gown seemed to move and breathe. I'm going to sincerely, genuinely, publicly congratulate them on their marriage. I'm going to smile and offer gifts and be the picture of a gracious, understanding, generous bride-to-be. Xiao Yu stared at me, confused and frightened in equal measure. I walked to the window, looking out at the bright morning sun illuminating our family's gardens. And then, when everyone is watching, when they think they've won, when they're drowning in their own smugness, I'm going to ask them one very simple question. Just one. And their entire carefully constructed house of lies is going to collapse and bury them alive. Understanding began to dawn in Xiao Yu's eyes, followed by something that looked almost like awe. She'd been with me since we were both children. She knew how my mind worked. Prepare the carriage, I said softly. And fetch the jade scepter from the treasury, the imperial green one father gave me last year. That will be my wedding gift to the happy couple. Miss. Xiao Yu's voice was barely a whisper. That jade is worth a fortune. I know exactly what it's worth. I smiled, and this time there was nothing kind in the expression. Consider it an investment. The most profitable one I'll ever make. The Chen family carriage rolled through the capital streets, its wheels rumbling over cobblestones like distant thunder, drawing stares from every corner, every shop, every tea house. Our imperial bestowed carriage was impossible to miss, vermilion lacquered wood inlaid with gold, pulled by 4 perfectly matched white horses, granted by the emperor himself to my father for his decades of service as prime minister. People stopped in their tracks as we passed, their daily routines forgotten as they craned their necks to see where we were headed. Isn't that Prime Minister Shen's carriage? Where could it be going? I heard Miss Shen's wedding is still weeks away. But the Chen wedding is today, surely she's not going there? Did you hear? Young Master Chen is marrying his brother's widow. Can you imagine? But isn't he already engaged to Miss Shen? What's going to happen? The whispers followed us like a wake of foam behind a boat, spreading through the streets faster than our horses could travel. By the time we arrived at the Chen family gates, half the city would know where I'd gone. Perfect. I wanted witnesses. I wanted the whole capital watching. I sat perfectly still inside the carriage, eyes closed, breathing slowly and evenly, preparing myself like a general before battle. Xiao Yu sat beside me, clutching a sandalwood box in her lap so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Inside that box lay a jade scepter worth more than most families earned in 5 years. Inside that box lay the bait for my trap. When we arrived at the Chen family gates, the contrast couldn't have been more stark. While I sat in contemplative silence, the Chen household was drowning in celebration. Festive red lanterns swayed in the morning breeze, their tassels dancing. Red silk banners proclaiming double happiness hung from every available surface. Guests crowded the entrance in their finest clothes, laughing and chatting, entirely unaware of the storm about to break over their heads. The doorman's face went white as fresh snow when he saw our carriage pull up. His mouth fell open. The smile of greeting died on his lips. For a moment, he simply stood there, frozen in shock. Then his survival instincts kicked in. He stumbled backward, nearly falling over his own feet, then turned and ran inside shouting at the top of his lungs for someone, anyone, to deal with this situation. I didn't wait for an invitation. I didn't wait for someone to come out and intercept me with prepared speeches and false welcomes. The moment Xiao Yu lifted the carriage curtain, I stepped out into the sunlight. The effect was immediate and total. My phoenix gown blazed like fire in the morning sun, the golden embroidery catching every eye like a beacon. The rubies in my hairpin threw red light across my face. The sheer magnificence of my appearance, dressed in full bridal regalia, wearing my wedding gown to someone else's wedding, struck every person present like a physical blow. Conversations died mid-sentence. Guests froze with teacups halfway to their lips. Mouths fell open. Eyes widened. I smiled gently, serenely, like a Buddha statue in a temple, and walked up the steps with measured grace, each footfall deliberate and unhurried. Every step was a statement. Every step was a challenge. Every step asked the silent question, do you dare acknowledge what you've done? Miss Chen. The household steward rushed out, nearly tripping in his haste, his face a mask of panic barely concealed behind a veneer of false courtesy that fooled no one. What brings you here today? We weren't expecting. Steward Liu, I said warmly, my voice carrying clearly to every guest in earshot. Today is a grand celebration for the Chen family. I've come to offer my heartfelt congratulations as young Master Chen's fiancé. Surely I don't need a special invitation to celebrate my future husband's joyous occasion? The word fiancé hung in the air like a blade suspended by a single thread. The word future husband cut through the festive atmosphere like winter wind. Steward Liu's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. No sound came out. What could he say? How could he deny it? Our engagement was registered with the Imperial Bureau. It was public record. Legal and binding. I didn't wait for him to find words. I walked past him with the same serene smile, heading directly for the main hall where the wedding ceremony was taking place. The wedding hall fell silent as attuned the moment I crossed the threshold. It was as if someone had cast a spell that stole every voice, every laugh, every whisper. The silence was so complete I could hear my own breathing, hear the soft rustle of my gown as I moved, hear the distant sound of birds singing in the garden outside, oblivious to the human drama unfolding within these walls. Every head in the hall turned as one. Every eye fixed on me in my wedding finery, in the gown that announced without words, without mercy, exactly what I was and what they'd done. The magnificent phoenix gown that should have been worn at my own wedding, worn here at my betrayer's ceremony, was an accusation more powerful than any words. At the center of the hall stood Chen Wei Long in scarlet wedding robes. He should have looked handsome, dashing, the proud groom. Instead, his face was the color of old paper. His eyes were wide with something between guilt and horror. Beside him, Lady Mei Yun wore a matching ensemble, her face covered by the traditional red veil that all brides wore. But even through the silk, I could see her flinch at my entrance. And I could see, clear as day, the slight but unmistakable swell of her belly beneath the carefully draped wedding robes. On the dais at the front of the hall sat Chen Wei Long's parents, Lord Chen, holder of a hereditary marquis title, and his wife, Lady Chen. Beside them sat the true power in the family, old Mistress Chen, Wei Long's grandmother, the matriarch who ruled the household with an iron fist wrapped in silk. Old Mistress Chen's expression of smug satisfaction, the look of a chess master who'd just executed a perfect strategy, froze on her face like ice crystallizing. Her mouth was still curved in a slight smile, but her eyes had gone wide with shock. She hadn't expected this. She'd expected tears, tantrums, maybe even violence. She'd expected me to stay home and cry like a proper jilted bride. She hadn't expected me to show up looking like a queen arriving at her coronation. Lin Yu. Chen Wei Long finally found his voice. It came out strangled, hoarse, barely above a whisper. What are you doing here? In his voice, I could hear everything he wasn't saying, the guilt, the panic, the resentment. Yes, resentment. As if my appearance had interrupted something, as if I was the one causing problems by not gracefully accepting my humiliation. I let my smile widen, warm as spring sunshine, gentle as a mother's touch. Wei Long, it's been too long. How have you been? I heard about today's happy event and simply had to come offer my sincere congratulations. I gestured around the elaborately decorated hall with an expansive sweep of my arm. You and Lady Mei Yun are getting married, and you're to be a father. Such a momentous, joyous occasion. As your fiancé, how could I possibly not celebrate with you? What kind of wife would I be if I stayed away on the happiest day of your life? My tone was absolutely perfect, sweet, gentle, warm, utterly proper. The tone of a devoted fiancé delighted by her beloved's happiness. The expressions on the Chen family's faces went through a visible transformation. The panic eased slightly. Confusion replaced some of the fear. Was I really this stupid? This compliant? This willing to accept humiliation? Old Mistress Chen recovered first. She was a woman who'd navigated court politics for 60 years. She recognized an opportunity when she saw one, or thought she did. She cleared her throat importantly, drawing all attention to herself, and put on the benevolent expression of a wise elder dispensing wisdom to the young and foolish. It's very good that you've come, Lin Yu. Your understanding and generosity in this difficult situation do you great credit. It shows the excellent upbringing your late mother gave you before she passed. She paused, letting her words sink in, building toward her point. You see how difficult the situation is, I'm sure. Lady Mei Yun is alone in this world now, widowed so young, and she's carrying a child. She has no one to protect her, no one to rely on. Wei Long, as her brother-in-law, as family, simply must do his duty. It's a matter of honor, you understand. Family obligation. Confucian virtue. Another pause, this one calculated to perfection. Don't you worry about a thing, child. Although Lady Mei is marrying in first due to the urgent circumstances, she's entering only as a secondary wife. Next month, when you marry in as planned, you will still be the legitimate primary wife, the true mistress of this household. Our Chen family will absolutely not treat you poorly. You'll have all the respect and authority your position deserves. The words sounded so righteous, so reasonable, so carefully constructed to make the intolerable seem not just acceptable but inevitable and proper. Around us, guests who'd been holding their breath began to relax. They started whispering among themselves, nodding in agreement with old Mistress Chen's wisdom. Miss Chen is indeed a lady from a prominent family. Her demeanor is extraordinary. Such grace under difficult circumstances. She's not making a scene at all. She can even put up with being wronged like this. She'll surely be a virtuous and patient wife in the future. The Shen family raised her well. She knows how to be reasonable. The whispers were exactly what the Chen family wanted, praise for my supposed magnanimity, admiration for my supposed tolerance, respect for my supposed understanding. They wanted everyone to see me as a good, obedient girl who knew her place and wouldn't cause trouble. The trap was set. The bait was taken. They thought they'd won. Perfect. I bowed deeply and respectfully to old Mistress Chen, the very picture of a filial junior honoring a revered elder. You're absolutely right, Grandmother Chen. I understand completely. The situation is indeed difficult, and the Chen family's sense of duty and honor is truly inspiring. The daughters of the Shen family have always been taught to be understanding and supportive. I straightened and turned to Xiaoyu, who stood 2 steps behind me like a proper servant. I gave her the slightest nod. Xiaoyu immediately understood. She stepped forward, moving with deliberate ceremony, and opened the sandalwood box she'd been clutching since we left home. The moment the lid lifted, the entire hall gasped as one. Inside the box, cushioned on silk that was itself worth a small fortune, lay a jade scepter of the finest imperial green jade. The color was so pure, so intense, that it seemed to glow with inner light. The carving was exquisite beyond words, dragons and phoenixes intertwined in an eternal dance, each scale and feather rendered in perfect detail. You could tell at a single glance that this was an heirloom piece, something that belonged in the emperor's treasury, not in the possession of private citizens. Imperial green jade, someone breathed in awe. My God, a piece that large and that pure. The Shen family must have spent a fortune. That's probably worth more than this entire estate. Such generosity, such face given to the Chen family. The eyes of the Chen family members lit up with undisguised greed, especially old Mistress Chen. Avarice burned in her expression like fire. This single piece of jade could solve a significant portion of their family's financial difficulties. The Chen family, for all their titles and prestige, were cash poor compared to the Shen family's commercial empire. She thought I was buying my way into their good graces. She thought I was so desperate to marry her grandson that I'd pay any price. Foolish woman. I lifted the jade scepter from its silk cushion with both hands, treating it with the reverence such a treasure deserved. The weight of it was substantial, solid, real. I walked forward with slow, ceremonial steps until I stood directly in front of Chen Wei Long and Lady Mei Yun. Wei Long, Lady Mei, I said softly, intimately, as if we were the only three people in the room. This is my wedding gift to you both. A symbol of my sincere happiness for your union. I looked directly at them, my smile never wavering, never showing a crack. I wish you both to be forever of one heart, to live in harmony all your days, and to be blessed with children soon. I deliberately, carefully, slowly emphasized those last three words, blessed with children soon. Under the concealing red veil, Lady Mei Yun's entire body trembled like a leaf in a storm. Chen Wei Long's hand shook visibly as he reached out to take the jade scepter from me. He tried to smile, tried to thank me, tried to play his part in this charade. Lin Yu, this is too much, you shouldn't have. Please, I insist, I interrupted smoothly, pressing the heavy jade into his unwilling hands. It's the least I can do for such a joyous occasion. Then I turned back to old Mistress Chen on her seat of honor, my expression shifting to one of even deeper respect and deference. Grandmother Chen, you just said that I should be understanding and considerate of Lady Mei's difficulties. Naturally, I am considerate. How could I not be? I let my voice fill with sympathy, with kindness, with concern. Lady Mei was widowed in her youth when your elder grandson fell in battle. She's been so lonely and helpless, all alone in this world. And now she finds herself with child. How frightening that must be for her. How vulnerable she must feel. And Wei Long, as her brother-in-law, is so noble and honorable to take on this responsibility, to protect his widowed sister-in-law and her child. Such loyalty. Such righteousness. Such filial devotion to family duty. I pressed my hands together as if in prayer, my expression one of genuine, heartfelt admiration. For such a benevolent and righteous act, I, Lin Yu of the Shen family, am filled with nothing but the deepest admiration and respect. Every word I spoke was technically true. Every word reinforced the exact narrative the Chen family had constructed to justify this farce. I was giving them everything they wanted, laying out their fig leaf and smoothing it flat for everyone to see. Old Mistress Chen's expression completely relaxed. Her face showed unconcealable smugness, satisfaction, triumph. The way she looked at me had changed. Now she saw me as a foolish, weak-willed junior who'd been completely manipulated, completely controlled, completely tamed. Someone to be used and discarded at will. The gazes of the surrounding guests also shifted. The shock and scandal in their expressions faded, replaced by genuine sympathy for my plight and a trace of barely concealed contempt for my weakness. They pitied me for accepting such humiliation. They despised me for being so pathetic. Let them think that. Let them all think exactly that. Very good. The stage was set. The actors were in position. The audience was watching with bated breath. The fish had taken the bait, swum right into my net, and were congratulating themselves on finding such an easy meal. Now it was time to pull the net closed and watch them drown. The smile on my face didn't change by even a fraction. But my tone shifted, taking on a note of innocent, naive confusion. The confused schoolgirl who didn't quite understand what the adults were discussing. It's just. I let out a soft sound of puzzlement, tilting my head slightly. I do have one small question that's been bothering me. I hope Grandmother Chen and Lord Chen won't mind clearing up my confusion? I'm sure it's just me being silly and not understanding properly. Old Mistress Chen was in such a good mood, riding so high on her perceived victory, that she waved her hand with magnanimous indulgence. Of course, child. Ask anything you like. What's troubling your pretty little head? She thought what I was going to ask was something trivial, perhaps about the wedding schedule, or the living arrangements, or some detail about the dowry. She had answers prepared for all of those questions, answers that would make her family look generous while keeping me firmly under their thumb. She had no idea what was coming. I looked at Lady Mei Yun's belly, at the unmistakable swell beneath her wedding robes, and my expression was nothing but innocent concern, the concern of one woman for another in a delicate condition. I heard the servants mention that Lady Mei is already more than 3 months pregnant. Is that correct? The words fell into the wedding hall like stones into still water. The atmosphere didn't shatter, not yet, but ripples of unease began spreading outward in invisible circles. The smile on old Mistress Chen's face stiffened slightly, but she recovered quickly and nodded, her expression shifting to one of sorrowful sympathy. Yes, that's right. Poor Lady Mei. This child has had such a difficult life. When she discovered she was expecting, it was already. She trailed off with a heavy sigh, as if the situation was too tragic for words. In any case, it's the flesh and blood of our Chen family. There's absolutely no reason to let the child wander about without a father, without protection, without a name. She was being deliberately vague, glossing over the details, trying to move past the topic as quickly as possible. The surrounding guests also felt there was something slightly off about the timing, but since it was a joyous occasion for the powerful Chen family, no one dared to probe too deeply or ask uncomfortable questions. They just assumed that the widowed sister-in-law had conceived a posthumous child before her husband's death and had simply discovered the pregnancy late. These things happened. Women sometimes didn't realize they were with child until several months had passed. The explanation was thin, but it was plausible enough that people were willing to accept it rather than cause a scene. But me? I wasn't going to accept anything. I was going to take that paper-thin pretense and tear it to absolute shreds in front of everyone. 3 months pregnant, I repeated thoughtfully, as if trying to understand a difficult mathematical problem. I raised my hand and began counting on my fingers, my brow furrowed in concentration, my expression completely earnest. Let me see if I have this right. My voice wasn't loud, but in the tense silence of the hall, it carried to every corner, reached every ear, left no one in doubt about what I was saying. Now this is certainly strange, I continued, still counting on my fingers like a child working out her arithmetic. I remember it perfectly clearly, I have a very good memory for dates, you see. Elder brother Chen, who was Lady Mei's late husband and Wei Long's older brother, went on a military expedition to the northern border last spring. While there, he unfortunately contracted plague and died of his illness in the army camp. Everyone in the capital mourned his loss. He was a hero, defending our empire. For every word I spoke, the faces of the Chen family members turned a shade paler, as if I was literally draining the blood from their bodies with my voice. Chen Wei Long's hands had started to tremble visibly. That priceless jade scepter in his grip was shaking so hard it was in danger of falling. Lady Mei Yun was trembling like a leaf in a hurricane, her breathing rapid and shallow under her veil. And as for the guests filling the hall, their expressions were beginning to change from polite attention to dawning confusion, then shock, then a hint of disgusted realization. From his death to this very day, I continued relentlessly, my tone still innocent and confused, it has been exactly 1 year and 3 months. No more, no less. I remember because we received the official notice of his death last spring, and I attended the mourning ceremony your family held. It was very moving. So that's 1 year and 3 months. 15 full months. I paused, letting that number sink into every mind in the hall. 15 months. Long enough for the arithmetic to become crystal clear. In other words, a full 15 months have passed since your elder son died, Grandmother Chen. I looked up from my fingers, my expression the picture of innocent bewilderment. And yet Lady Mei is only 3 months pregnant now. So the child could not possibly have been conceived before her husband's death, could it? The timing doesn't work. The silence in the hall was no longer merely awkward. It was suffocating, oppressive, crushing. No one dared to breathe. Everyone was doing the same arithmetic in their heads. Everyone was reaching the same inescapable conclusion. 15 months since the husband died. 3 months pregnant. That meant the child was conceived a full year after her husband's death. This wasn't a posthumous child born from a final night of passion before a soldier went to war. This wasn't a widow discovering late that she carried her beloved husband's last gift. This was something else entirely. But I wasn't finished. I wasn't going to leave any room for doubt, any space for alternative explanations, any possibility of confusion. I was going to spell it out in terms so simple that even a child could understand. "Grandmother Chen," I said, my voice still sweet and confused and utterly innocent, "you are an educated and learned woman. You've lived many years and know many things. Can you please explain something to me? Help me understand?" I tilted my head, my expression one of complete, naive puzzlement. Isn't a woman's pregnancy supposed to last for 10 months? That's what all the medical texts say, isn't it? That's what everyone knows. 10 months from conception to birth. I paused, letting the question hang in the air. So why is it that Lady Mei's child has managed to stay in the womb for a full 15 months? From her husband's death until now, 15 months have passed. If she were carrying his child, conceived before his death, wouldn't she have given birth almost half a year ago? Another pause, longer this time, letting everyone visualize exactly what I was describing. This is truly strange," I said, my voice rising slightly with what sounded like genuine fascination. "Now that I think about it more carefully, elder brother Chen passed away over a year ago. So whose child is Lady Mei carrying? Did she perhaps obtain some immortal elixir from a Taoist master that allows babies to remain in the womb for 15 months? Or is there some other explanation that I, in my ignorance, am simply not aware of?" Boom. The moment my words finished echoing through the hall, it was as if a thunderbolt had struck the building. The effect was instantaneous and total. Dead silence. Complete and utter dead silence. So quiet you could hear the dust settling, hear hearts beating, hear the world holding its breath. Everyone's breathing stopped. Their gazes became like countless sharp knives, cutting back and forth between Chen Wei Long, Lady Mei Yun, Old Mistress Chen, and Lord Chen, slicing away their carefully constructed excuses, their righteous justifications, their moral high ground. In those gazes I saw shock, disbelief, disgust, contempt, horror, and a sick sort of fascination. The fascination people have when watching something forbidden, something taboo, something that should never see the light of day. The wedding hall, which had been full of joy and celebration just moments ago, had instantly transformed into a courtroom, a tribunal, an execution ground for judging the worst kind of scandal. What nonsense are you spouting?" Old Mistress Chen was the first to react. She shot up from her chair with a speed that belied her advanced age, pointing at me with a trembling finger, her face purple with rage and something that looked almost like panic. "You vicious girl! How dare you slander Lady Mei's innocence on her wedding day? How dare you imply such filthy things in front of all these witnesses?" But I was still smiling, my expression still pure and flawless, like fresh snow that had never been touched. "Slander, Grandmother Chen? When has Lin Yu ever slandered anyone? I don't understand what you mean." I spread my hands in a gesture of complete innocence. "I'm merely stating facts that everyone can verify and asking for your guidance on a matter I don't understand. Could it be that I've remembered the date wrong? Could it be that I miscalculated somehow?" I turned to look at Lord Chen, who sat beside his mother looking like he wanted the earth to open up and swallow him whole. "Lord Chen, you are the Grand Marshal of the Northern Armies. Elder brother Chen was your subordinate, your own son. You were the one who personally reported his death to the Ministry of War for approval of his pension and honors. You signed all the official documents." My voice was gentle, reasonable, merely asking for clarification. "Do you remember what date you put on those documents? What date you reported as his death? Surely you remember. It's only been 15 months. And it was your own son." Lord Chen's face turned the color of liver. His lips moved, but no sound emerged. His hands clenched on the armrests of his chair so tightly his knuckles went white. He couldn't deny it. He couldn't lie about it. He'd signed the date himself in official documents submitted to the imperial government. The entire capital city knew when his son had died. The entire court had mourned. The emperor himself had sent condolences. This was ironclad, indisputable, documented fact. Or perhaps. I let my gaze slide from Lord Chen back to the wedding couple at the center of the hall. My voice dropped lower, more intimate, more dangerous. Perhaps the issue isn't with my memory or my arithmetic at all. I looked directly at Chen Wei Long, and for the first time since entering the hall, I let my true expression show, cold, sharp, merciless. Perhaps this child simply isn't elder brother Chen's posthumous child at all. Perhaps that's not why we're all gathered here today. Chen Wei Long's face had gone from white to gray to green, cycling through colors no healthy human face should ever be. So, Wei Long, I said clearly, each word falling like the stroke of an executioner's blade, can you tell all of us gathered here as witnesses, whose child the woman you're marrying today is really carrying? Whose baby is in her belly? Who is the real father? I paused, then delivered the final cut. You're so full of filial devotion and family loyalty and righteousness. You're in such a desperate hurry to hold this wedding, to legitimize this child, to make this woman your wife. So please, enlighten us. What exactly are you taking responsibility for? That final question was like the sharpest sword ever forged, like divine judgment itself, piercing straight through the heart of the Chen family's lies and pinning them to the wall for everyone to see. Clatter. The imperial green jade scepter finally slipped from Chen Wei Long's nerveless fingers. It hit the floor with a sharp, clear sound that seemed impossibly loud in the silent hall. The jade, harder than steel, shattered into a dozen pieces. Green fragments scattered across the floor like drops of poisoned blood, like the Chen family's reputation fragmenting beyond any hope of repair. The symbolism was lost on no one. The precious wedding gift, destroyed. The symbol of harmony and happiness, broken. Just like the Chen family's face. Just like their carefully constructed fiction. Just like their future. Shattered until not even fragments remained large enough to piece back together. Ah! Lady Mei Yun let out a shriek that sounded barely human. She tore the wedding veil from her head with shaking hands, revealing a face streaked with tears and twisted with rage and desperation. Her carefully applied makeup was smeared. Her eyes were wild. She pointed at me with a trembling finger. Shen Linyu, you're lying. You're spouting malicious lies. You're just jealous that Wei Long loves me instead of you. You can't have his heart, so you want to destroy us. You can't stand to see us happy. Even now, even at this moment, she was trying to use love as a shield, as a justification, as an excuse for the inexcusable. How pathetic. How absolutely pathetic. I laughed. The sound was cold and sharp as breaking ice. Love? Is that what you call this, Lady Mei? My voice rose, cutting through her hysteria like a hot knife through butter. What kind of love makes a widow have a secret affair with her own husband's brother while her husband is barely cold in his grave? What kind of love makes you conceive a bastard child that can't see the light of day and then try to pass it off as a posthumous heir to deceive everyone? I took a step toward her, and she actually flinched backward. What kind of love makes my fiancé, the man I was supposed to marry in less than a month, disregard the honor of my family, violate our marriage contract, and hastily arrange this absurd farce of a wedding? All for the sake of legitimizing the illegitimate child in your belly? Each question was another blow, another cut, another wound. Lady Mei, you tell me, I said, my voice dropping to something deadly quiet. Is this your so-called love? Is this the great romance that justifies everything? I shook my head slowly. This isn't love. This is adultery. This is an illicit affair. This is debauchery that violates every moral principle our society is built upon. This is shamelessness that brings disgrace to your ancestors and destroys your family's honor. This is a scandal that will be whispered about in every tea house and every noble home for generations. My voice grew louder with each sentence, until I was nearly shouting. This isn't some tragic romance. This is betrayal. This is corruption. This is exactly the kind of moral decay that tears families apart and destroys dynasties. Every word hit like a physical blow. Every sentence was carefully chosen for maximum impact. And every accusation was completely, undeniably true. The guests in the hall weren't just watching anymore. They were judging. Condemning. Their faces showed open contempt and disgust now. In our society, among the great aristocratic families, reputation and propriety are everything. Face is more valuable than gold. Honor is more precious than life itself. And adultery between a widow and her husband's own brother? That was beyond scandalous. That was monstrous. That violated every principle of filial piety and family loyalty that our entire social order was built upon. You. Lady Mei Yun swayed on her feet, her face going from red to white. She couldn't catch her breath. Her eyes rolled back in her head. And then she simply collapsed, crumpling to the floor like a puppet with cut strings. Chen Wei Long scrambled to catch her, to hold her up, but he didn't dare look at me. He couldn't meet anyone's eyes. He just clutched her to his chest and turned desperately to his parents on the dais. "Father, mother," he said, his voice breaking with desperation and rage. "Do something. Throw this crazy woman out. Get her out of here now." Crazy woman. Those words, coming from him, struck me as so absurd that I actually laughed again. The sound made several people flinch. Throw me out? I shook my head, still smiling. Chen Wei Long, have you forgotten who I am? Have you forgotten that I, Chen Yu, am your fiancé? Properly and legally betrothed with our marriage contract registered in the Imperial Bureau and our names recorded together? I spread my arms wide, gesturing to encompass the entire hall and everyone in it. Today, you arranged this wedding behind my back. You gave me this enormous surprise in front of all the prominent families in the capital. And now you want to simply throw me out, shut the door, and continue with your happy occasion as if nothing happened? I let my smile turn sharp as a blade. I'm afraid there's no such convenient thing in this world. You don't get to humiliate me and then make me disappear when I refuse to cooperate with your plans. I turned away from Wei Long. He was already dead to me, already less than nothing, already not worth another moment of my attention. Instead, I addressed Lord Chen and old Mistress Chen, who sat frozen on the dais like statues. My voice returned to its earlier calmness, but now it carried a bone-chilling coldness that made the temperature in the hall seem to drop. Lord Chen, old Mistress Chen, I believe I understand the situation perfectly now. Your household's deep familial affection and righteousness is truly something my humble Shen family cannot hope to match or comprehend. From within my sleeve, I slowly drew out a formal letter that I'd prepared before leaving home that morning. The paper was expensive, the calligraphy perfect, the seal official. Under the shocked gazes of every person present, I walked with measured steps to the altar where offerings to heaven and the ancestors were laid out. With careful ceremony, I placed the letter on the altar table, positioning it precisely in the center. Then I slammed my hand down on it with enough force to make the candles jump and the incense ash scatter. I, Chen Yu, daughter of Prime Minister Shen, do hereby formally announce in front of all these witnesses, I proclaimed, my voice ringing clear as a bell through the hall. The marriage contract between myself and Chen Wei Long of the Chen family is void and null. From this moment forward, his marriage and my marriage have nothing whatsoever to do with each other. From this moment forward, I, Chen Yu, have no connection of any kind to the Chen family. My voice echoed off the walls, seeming to shake the very foundations of the building. Every person in the hall was struck dumb with shock. For a woman to break off an engagement, it was shameful. For a woman to do it publicly, in front of witnesses, on her betrothed's wedding day to another woman, it was unprecedented. Revolutionary. Unthinkable. But I'd done it. You dare. Lord Chen suddenly found his voice and his courage. He slammed his hand on the arm of his chair and exploded with rage. Chen Yu, don't go too far. Marriage is a sacred contract witnessed by heaven and earth and ancestors. How is that something you can just decide to break on your own? This is outrageous. This is unacceptable. I turned to face him, and the look in my eyes made him actually recoil slightly. Lord Chen, I said coldly, your household harbors an illicit affair between a widow and her brother-in-law that produced an illegitimate child. You attempted to cover up this moral abomination with lies and manipulation. You tried to force me to accept this humiliation and pretend nothing was wrong. And you dare lecture me about the sacred nature of marriage contracts? I laughed bitterly. The sound was harsh and mocking. Let me be very clear. Even if my father and my brother were standing here right now, they would say exactly the same thing I'm saying. The Chen family cannot and will not be connected to such a disgrace. Our family's honor means more than any contract. I paused, letting that sink in, then continued in a voice like ice. Furthermore, according to the laws of our empire, when the groom's family breaks faith through moral corruption and makes it impossible for the marriage to proceed, they must return the betrothal gifts tenfold and provide additional compensation to the bride's family for damage to their reputation. I looked Lord Chen directly in the eyes. Within 3 days, I expect to see delivered to my father's gates a complete inventory of all betrothal gifts the Chen family received from my family, along with the appropriate tenfold return and additional compensation for my damaged reputation. If you are even a single copper coin short, I will personally deliver a formal legal complaint to the Imperial Court and the Ministry of Justice. My smile was like a knife edge. And then we can stand before the imperial judges and discuss in excruciating detail exactly how a woman can possibly be pregnant for 15 months. I'm sure the judges will be fascinated to hear your explanation. Perhaps they'll want to examine medical texts. Perhaps they'll want to call witnesses. Perhaps they'll want to investigate every detail of this remarkable situation. Lord Chen's face turned so red I thought he might actually have an apoplectic fit. His mouth opened and closed. A vein throbbed in his forehead. He made a strangled sound deep in his throat. But no words came out. What could he say? How could he defend the indefensible? I'd finished what I came to do. I'd said everything that needed to be said. There was nothing more these people deserved from me, not my time, not my attention, not even my contempt. I turned on my heel, my phoenix gown swirling around me like wings of flame, and walked toward the exit. My head was high. My back was straight. My steps were firm and unhurried, as if I were walking on level ground instead of through the ruins of what was supposed to have been my future. When I'd arrived, I had moved with grace and elegance, every inch the noble lady. When I left, I walked with the pride of a warrior who had just won a decisive battle. Behind me, chaos erupted. I could hear old Mistress Chen shrieking orders. Lord Chen bellowing for servants. Guests talking over each other in shock and excitement. Lady Mei Yun sobbing hysterically. Chen Wei Long's voice trying desperately to restore order and failing utterly. The wedding banquet that was supposed to celebrate their union had become a disaster, a scandal, a laughingstock that would be discussed in every tea house and noble residence in the capital for months or years to come. But none of it mattered to me anymore. None of it could touch me. I'd already moved beyond them, beyond their reach, beyond their ability to hurt me. The moment I walked out through the main gates of the Chen family estate and into the sunlight, I took a deep, full breath of free air. How liberating it felt. How absolutely, wonderfully liberating. I had just destroyed my own engagement, shattered my own betrothal, violated every social convention about how a proper young lady should behave. And I'd never felt more powerful in my entire life. When I returned to the Chen family residence, the atmosphere was already tense with anticipation. Word had traveled fast. Our servants had heard rumors. The household was buzzing. My father, Prime Minister Shen Kongyuan, was waiting in the main hall. So was my older brother, General Shen Qinghe, who commanded the imperial garrison that protected the capital. Both of them stood as I entered. My father's face showed heartache and barely controlled rage. My brother's hand was already on his sword hilt, his expression murderous. "Little sister," my brother said immediately, his voice tight with fury. "Tell me everything. Tell me exactly what they did to you." I'll go right now and flatten that entire estate. I'll drag Chen Wei Long out by his hair and make him beg for mercy he won't receive. I held up a hand to stop him. Then I bowed deeply to both of them, holding the formal position that showed respect and also acknowledged fault. Father, brother, I've failed you. I brought dishonor to our family name. I've broken my engagement publicly and made us the subject of gossip. My father moved quickly for a man his age. He grasped my arms and pulled me upright, his eyes fierce. Stop that. Stop that right now. You haven't dishonored anyone. If anything, I've failed you. I'm the one who arranged this match in the first place. I should have investigated the Chen family more carefully. I should have seen what kind of people they truly were. His voice softened slightly. Tell me what happened. Tell me what you did. I heard rumors, but I want to hear the truth from you. So I told them. I recounted the entire morning from the moment Xiao Yu burst into my room with news of the wedding through my arrival at the Chen estate, my presentation of the jade gift, my innocent questions, the mathematical impossibility I'd exposed, my public accusations, and finally my formal annulment of the engagement right there in front of everyone. I spoke calmly and clearly, leaving nothing out, neither embellishing nor downplaying what I'd done. When I reached the part where I publicly broke the engagement, where I slammed the annulment document on the altar and announced to all witnesses that the contract was void, both my father and brother stared at me with expressions I'd never seen before. Shock. Awe. Pride. And something that looked almost like fear, not of me, but for me, at the risk I'd taken. Then my brother threw back his head and let out a roar of laughter that shook the rafters. That's my sister. By all the gods and ancestors, that's my sister. He slapped his thigh hard enough to bruise. You didn't just break the engagement, you destroyed them. You buried them alive under their own lies in front of the entire capital's elite. He turned to our father, still laughing. Father, did you hear? She made them take the jade gift first, made them feel safe, made them think they'd won, and then she casually asked about the pregnancy dates and let simple arithmetic destroy them. It's brilliant. It's perfect. It's exactly how our family handles insults. My father's stern expression had melted into something I rarely saw, genuine, unreserved approval. He stroked his beard, a gesture he made when deeply pleased. You did well, Lin Yu. Better than I could have hoped. The Chen family brought this entirely upon themselves through their own greed and moral corruption. His eyes grew hard and cold. But you're right about one thing, breaking the engagement and demanding compensation isn't enough. Not nearly enough. They dared to humiliate my daughter, to treat the Shen family with contempt, to think they could manipulate us and face no consequences. He stood, and suddenly he looked less like my gentle, scholarly father and more like the prime minister who had controlled the imperial court for 20 years through brilliance and ruthlessness in equal measure. They'd better prepare themselves, he said softly. The real consequences are just beginning. By the time I'm finished with them, the Chen family will wish you'd simply cried and made a scene instead of doing what you did. My brother nodded grimly, his hand still on his sword. They wanted to preserve their face while destroying ours. So we'll do something much worse. We'll let everyone in the empire see exactly what's beneath that face they care so much about. We'll strip away every lie, every pretense, every false virtue. I looked at the determination in my father's eyes and the cold fury in my brother's face, and I knew that the fire I'd started at the Chen family wedding was about to be fanned into an inferno that would consume everything they'd built. The revenge I'd taken was personal. But what my family was about to do, that would be total, complete, and absolutely devastating. The next morning, the imperial court convened for the regular morning assembly in the Golden Throne Hall. The massive chamber with its soaring ceilings and dragon-carved pillars was filled with officials in their ranked robes, everyone taking their assigned positions according to their status and department. Lord Chen forced himself to attend despite looking worse than a corpse. Overnight, the scandal had spread through every level of society like wildfire. As he'd walked through the streets to the palace, he'd felt contemptuous gazes following him from every direction. In the court itself, his fellow officials avoided him like he carried some contagious disease, as if his moral corruption might somehow transfer through proximity. The morning session began with routine business, reports from various ministries, discussions of tax revenue, minor judicial matters. Lord Chen stood in his assigned position, head bowed, hoping desperately that the matter would be quietly forgotten, that the Chen family would settle things privately for the sake of everyone's face. He was a fool. Just when it seemed the session might conclude without incident, my father stepped forward from his position near the throne. He held his jade tablet of office, his expression grave and formal. "Your Majesty," he said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast hall. "This humble subject has a memorial to present to the throne." The emperor, seated on the dragon throne in golden robes, straightened slightly. "Prime Minister Chen, speak." My father bowed deeply. "This subject wishes to formally impeach Lord Chen." The court erupted in shocked whispers. Lord Chen's head snapped up, his face draining of what little color it had. He stared at my father with the expression of a man who'd just been stabbed in the back. But my father's expression was impassive, cold, completely unmoved by Lord Chen's obvious distress. "Lord Chen serves as Marquis and holds significant hereditary rank and privileges," my father continued in a voice that echoed through the suddenly silent hall. "However, he has proven himself utterly unfit for such honor. He is lax in managing his household. He has allowed his family's reputation to become corrupt and depraved. He has indulged his son Chen Wei Long, who, disregarding all human ethics and moral principles, committed adultery with his own widowed sister-in-law and secretly fathered an illegitimate child." Gasps echoed through the court. Even though rumors had been flying since yesterday, hearing the accusation stated formally in court was different. This was official. This was permanent. This was going into the imperial records. What is more, my father's voice grew harder. To cover up this shameful scandal, the Chen family attempted to legitimize this bastard child through deception. They planned to force my daughter, Chen Wei Long's legal betrothed, to accept this humiliation and keep silent about their crimes. They treated the marriage contract registered with the Imperial Bureau as meaningless. They showed contempt for the laws of this empire and for your Majesty's authority. He paused, then delivered the killing blow. How can such a person, one who cannot even manage his own family, who tolerates adultery and deception and violations of fundamental morality, how can such a person hold high office and serve as an example to others? My father's voice took on a tone of righteous indignation. The ancient sages taught us, cultivate the self, manage the family, govern the state, bring peace to the world. These are the 4 stages of virtue. If a man cannot even accomplish the second stage, if he cannot manage his own household, how can he possibly be trusted with governing the state or serving your Majesty? It was a devastating argument, and my father had framed it perfectly. He wasn't talking about private family drama. He wasn't mentioning personal grudges or hurt feelings. He was speaking about moral corruption, about violations of fundamental social order, about unfitness for office. He'd elevated the scandal from a personal matter to an issue of state importance. "This humble subject implores your Majesty to strictly investigate the immoral conduct of the Chen household," my father concluded. "Strip Lord Chen of his title and position. Make an example of him. Show the entire empire that moral corruption will not be tolerated among those who serve the throne. Let this case serve as a warning to all families that reputation and virtue matter more than temporary advantage." My father's words were forceful, resonant, carrying the weight of absolute conviction. Every sentence was a hammer blow. Every phrase was carefully chosen for maximum impact. And he presented the case in a way that made it impossible for the emperor to ignore or dismiss. This wasn't about the Chen family's honor. This was about the moral foundations of the entire governmental system. Lord Chen fell to his knees with a heavy thud, cold sweat streaming down his face like rain. "Your Majesty, Prime Minister Chen is making false accusations. He's exaggerating and distorting the facts. This is him using his position to pursue a personal vendetta." But before the emperor could respond, another official stepped forward, the chief censor, head of the bureau responsible for monitoring official conduct. This subject seconds Prime Minister Shen's motion, he declared. The scandal of the Chen household has become a laughingstock throughout the capital. It severely damages the reputation and dignity of all court officials. If we do not punish this severely, how will the common people view us? How will they respect our authority and moral leadership? Immediately after, the Minister of Rights stepped forward. This subject also seconds the motion. The Chen family's actions violate fundamental principles of filial piety and family ethics that are the foundation of our civilization. Then the Vice Minister of Punishments, this subject seconds the motion. One after another, officials stepped forward to support my father's impeachment. All of them were his students, his former subordinates, officials who owed him favors or who belonged to his political faction. In less than 10 minutes, Lord Chen was buried under an avalanche of accusations and demands for punishment. The emperor sat on his throne, his face growing darker and darker as each official spoke. The Chen marriage alliance had been arranged with his blessing. The scandal didn't just embarrass the two families, it embarrassed him, made him look foolish for approving such a match. And emperors do not like looking foolish. Lord Chen. The emperor's voice was ice cold, sharp enough to cut stone. For your failure to manage your household, for tolerating moral corruption, for bringing disgrace to this court, you are hereby suspended from all duties and stripped of your salary for 3 years pending a full investigation. Lord Chen swayed as if he'd been physically struck. But the emperor wasn't finished. Your son Chen Wei Long has shown himself to be of depraved character and fundamentally unfit for service. He is hereby barred from government employment permanently. He will never hold office, never serve the state, never be trusted with authority of any kind. Those words, permanently barred, were a death sentence for a young man from a noble family. Chen Wei Long's entire future, every opportunity, every chance at distinction or success, all of it destroyed with a single imperial decree. Furthermore, the emperor continued, this matter will be handed over to the imperial clan court and the capital prefecture magistrate for thorough investigation. If further crimes are uncovered, additional punishment will be levied. The emperor's judgment fell like an executioner's blade. Swift. Final. Merciless. Lord Chen collapsed completely, his body crumpling to the floor like a puppet with all its strings cut. His face was ashen. His eyes were empty. He knew, in that moment, that it was over. The Chen family was finished. But this was merely the beginning. The political destruction in the court was just the first attack in a carefully coordinated campaign. My brother, General Shen Qinghe, wasn't just a military commander. He also managed the Shen family's vast commercial network, trading companies, merchant caravans, warehouses, and connections that spanned the empire. His first order after the court session, cut off all business relationships with the Chen family immediately and completely. The Chen family's main sources of income were several silk shops in the southern district and some agricultural estates on the outskirts of the capital. These businesses had been profitable for years, partly because of the family's political connections and partly because the Shen family's commercial network had been quietly supporting them with favorable terms. That support vanished overnight. My brother sent word to all the raw silk suppliers in the Jiangnan region, the area that produced the finest silk in the empire. The message was simple, sell to the Chen family, and you'll never sell to the Shen family again. Given that the Shen family purchased more silk than the next 10 buyers combined, the choice was obvious. Within 24 hours, every Chen family silk shop found itself unable to purchase raw materials at any price. Their looms sat empty. Their workers had nothing to do. But my brother wasn't finished. He instructed several of the largest fabric merchants in the capital, all of whom did business with Shen family enterprises, to simultaneously slash their prices by 30% and introduce new, more beautiful materials. The Chen family shops, already struggling with no inventory, suddenly faced competition they couldn't match. Customers fled. Sales evaporated. Within 3 days, their warehouses were full of unsold old stock, their cash reserves were gone, and their creditors were getting nervous. the agricultural estates faced similar problems. The grain merchants who'd purchased the Chen family's harvests for years suddenly cancelled all their contracts. They were willing to pay substantial penalties rather than risk offending the Chen family. Without buyers for their grain, without income from their shops, with their expenses continuing and their debts coming due, the Chen family's financial situation collapsed with stunning speed. And word spread quickly. When creditors and moneylenders heard that the Chen family was in trouble, they did what creditors always do, they panicked and demanded immediate repayment of all outstanding loans. The Chen household, which had seemed so wealthy and stable just days ago, was suddenly drowning in debt with no way to pay it back. My brother's methods were fast, precise, and utterly ruthless. He didn't give the Chen family time to adapt or find alternative solutions. He pulled the rug out from under them so quickly and completely that they had no chance to catch themselves. What he wanted wasn't a slow decline. What he wanted was immediate, total financial collapse. And that's exactly what he delivered. Within a week, the Chen family was forced to start selling off property and possessions just to pay their most urgent debts. Servants were dismissed. Luxuries were sold. The great estate began to look shabby and neglected. The once mighty Chen family had been reduced to near poverty in less than 10 days. I sat in my rooms, listening to the reports Xiao Yu brought me each day, and felt only cold satisfaction. Miss, the Chen family sold their best carriage yesterday. Miss, I heard Lord Chen had another collapse and is bedridden. Miss, Lady Mei and Chen Wei Long had a terrible fight. Servants heard things breaking. Each piece of news was another confirmation that everything was proceeding exactly as planned. But the economic and political devastation, severe as it was, wasn't the worst punishment. The worst punishment was social isolation. Being cut off completely from their peers, from society, from any possibility of redemption or recovery. My father put out the word through his extensive network of allies and subordinates: anyone who associates with the Chen family is declaring themselves an enemy of the Chen family. In a hierarchical society like ours, where one's social connections determined everything, this was a death sentence. The Chen family had angered the emperor, lost their wealth, and been publicly shamed. Why would anyone risk the Chen family's displeasure by supporting them? Overnight, the Chen family became absolute pariahs. Former friends crossed the street to avoid them. Invitations to social events stopped arriving. When Lord Chen appeared in public, people turned their backs. Noble ladies who once visited the Chen household now gossiped viciously about them in tea houses and drawing rooms. Did you hear the details? The widow and her brother-in-law were carrying on while her husband was dying. Absolutely shameless. No morals whatsoever. And they tried to force Miss Shen to accept it. Can you imagine? The Shen family showed remarkable restraint. I would have done worse. Well, they are doing worse. The Chens are ruined. Completely ruined. It's exactly what they deserve. Moral corruption like that can't be tolerated. These conversations happened everywhere, constantly, spreading the scandal and the Chen family's shame to every corner of society. Chen Wei Long stopped going out entirely because he couldn't bear the pointing, the whispers, the open contempt. Lady Mei Yun, once a beautiful woman known for her elegance, became the ultimate cautionary tale, the negative example mothers used when teaching their daughters about virtue and proper conduct. Isolated, impoverished, disgraced, the Chen family had nowhere to turn, no one to help them, no hope of recovery. And their internal situation was just as bad as their external circumstances. On the third day after my dramatic exit from their wedding, Chen family servants arrived at our gates, shamefaced and humiliated, carrying chests full of gold, silver, and jewelry, the tenfold repayment of betrothal gifts I demanded. I didn't even bother opening the chests to count it. The amount didn't matter. What mattered was that they'd been forced to pay, forced to acknowledge their wrongdoing, forced to compensate me for their betrayal. I simply had the servants record the delivery and send the Chen representatives away without a word of acknowledgement. They didn't deserve my attention or my courtesy. While the Chen family descended into an ever-deepening nightmare, my life began to bloom with new possibilities. Far from damaging my reputation, as might have been expected, breaking off the engagement had made me famous throughout the capital and beyond. People called me decisive, intelligent, principled, courageous. They praised me for refusing to accept humiliation, for standing up for my own dignity and my family's honor. The story of how I'd exposed the scandal, especially the part about the impossible 15-month pregnancy, spread like wildfire and grew with each retelling. I became something of a legend, especially among young women who saw me as someone who'd refused to be a victim. Matchmakers flooded our gates with marriage proposals. Every day brought new portraits, new family histories, new offers from prominent households eager to form an alliance with the Chen family and with me specifically. My father had the servants compile them all, but he made his position clear. Lin Yu, this time you choose for yourself. Pick someone you genuinely respect, someone with integrity and character. Pick someone who will treat you as an equal partner, not a subordinate. And if he ever dares to treat you poorly. He smiled grimly. Well, your brother and I will make the Chen family's punishment look merciful by comparison. I went through the proposals carefully, evaluating each candidate not for superficial qualities but for substance. I wasn't interested in the most handsome or the wealthiest or the most poetically gifted. I wanted someone reliable. Someone honorable. Someone who would stand beside me, not above me or behind me. Finally, I made my choice, Zhao Muchen, heir to the Duke of An's household. Zhao Muchen was 21 years old, educated in both classical literature and military strategy, and already serving as a mid-level official in the Ministry of Justice. Most importantly, he had a reputation for integrity that was unusual in someone so young. He'd turned down several lucrative but ethically questionable opportunities, choosing principle over advancement. He was also famously aloof with women, showing no interest in the romantic intrigues that consumed so many young aristocrats. His focus was entirely on his duty to his family and his service to the state. A man like that, one who valued honor over pleasure, duty over self-interest, was exactly what I needed. The marriage was arranged quickly. Dukan himself came to propose the match formally, giving our family tremendous face. When the emperor heard about it, he was so pleased by the alliance between two of the court's most powerful families that he issued an imperial decree personally approving and blessing the union. He sent rare gifts from the palace treasury, jade, silk, precious medicines, exotic animals. The imperial decree itself, written in the emperor's own hand and stamped with the imperial seal, would become a treasured family heirloom. Everyone in the capital agreed, Shen Lin Yu had not just recovered from disaster but had actually improved her situation. The match with the Duke of An's heir was far superior to the engagement with Chen Wei Long had ever been. I knew better. This wasn't luck or fortune. This was the result of careful planning, decisive action, and absolute refusal to accept injustice. I'd taken what could have destroyed me and turned it into opportunity. On my wedding day, the entire capital seemed to celebrate. The bridal procession from my father's residence in the Eastern District stretched all the way across the city to the Duke of An's estate in the Western District. 188 chests of dowry, each one heavy with treasures and carefully inventoried, lined the streets. The red silk ribbons connecting them created a pathway visible from blocks away. My brother personally led 1,000 imperial guards as escort. The soldiers in their gleaming armor, marching in perfect formation, were a demonstration of our family's power and connections. Citizens crowded every available space to watch. They climbed on roofs, leaned from windows, packed the streets so densely that the procession had to move slowly. Look at that dowry. The Shen family is so wealthy. Miss Shen is so fortunate. This is even more magnificent than her first engagement would have been. The comments followed us through the streets, and I let them wash over me without reaction. My sedan chair, carried by 8 strong bearers and covered in red silk embroidered with gold phoenixes, swayed gently as we moved through the city. I sat inside in full bridal regalia, the phoenix crown on my head, the ceremonial robes my mother had left me, now finally worn for their intended purpose. And then we passed it, the Chen family estate. The contrast couldn't have been more stark or more deliberate. My brother had chosen the route specifically to go past their gates. The once magnificent estate now looked shabby and neglected. The gates needed paint. The walls needed repair. The courtyard visible through the open entrance was half empty, most of the decorative plants and sculptures sold off to pay debts. A few Chen family servants stood at the gate, watching my incredible procession pass by. Their faces showed naked envy and despair. I didn't even glance at them. They were beneath my notice, beneath my concern, already erased from my life. I wondered if Chen Wei Long and Lady Mei Yun were somewhere inside, watching through a window, listening to the music and celebration, understanding with perfect clarity exactly what they'd lost and what I'd gained. But it didn't matter. Their thoughts and feelings were utterly irrelevant to me. They were dust. They were nothing. They were a cautionary tale I'd someday tell my children about the importance of honor and the consequences of betrayal. At the Duke's estate, Zhao Muchen waited at the gates in formal wedding robes. He was tall and well-built, with an air of quiet competence about him. When he saw my sedan chair arrive, he stepped forward personally to hand me down, a mark of respect that wasn't strictly required but spoke volumes about his character. He lifted my veil in the bridal chamber later that evening, and the look in his eyes held no mere lust or possessiveness. Instead, I saw respect, appreciation, and something that looked almost like admiration. "Shen Linyu," he said clearly, his voice steady and formal. "From today forward, we are husband and wife. Partners in this life. I, Zhao Muchen, swear before heaven and earth that I will never betray you, never humiliate you, never give you cause to regret this union." The words were simple, but the sincerity behind them was unmistakable. I met his gaze directly. "I make the same vow to you, Zhao Muchen. We will build this life together as equals. No flowery poetry. No empty promises of eternal passionate love. Just honest, straightforward commitment between two people who understood what truly mattered." I knew in that moment that I'd chosen correctly. This man would be a true partner, not a master or a betrayer. 1 year after our wedding, I gave birth to a son. The celebration was enormous. The Duke's entire household rejoiced. My father and brother visited constantly, showering gifts on their grandson and heir. The emperor sent another decree of congratulations along with precious gifts for the child. My son's future was already secured before he could even speak. He would grow up surrounded by love, protected by two of the most powerful families in the empire, heir to wealth and position that most could only dream of. Zhao Muchen and I settled into a partnership that grew stronger with each passing month. He handled external affairs, his duties at court, his father's business matters, political relationships. I managed the household, a massive estate with hundreds of servants, complex finances, social obligations, and family matters. We consulted each other on important decisions. We supported each other's goals. We built something stable and strong. We were exactly what everyone said, the perfect couple, ideally matched, an example of how aristocratic marriages should function. News of the Chen family reached me occasionally, though I never sought it out. Lord Chen died less than 2 years after the scandal, worn down by shame and stress and financial ruin. Old Mistress Chen and Lady Chen followed him within months, some said from broken hearts, though I suspected it was more likely from the shock of going from wealthy aristocrats to near poverty. Chen Wei Long survived, if you could call it survival. He became a drunk, spending whatever money he could scrape together on cheap wine. When drunk, he beat Lady Mei Yun and screamed that she'd destroyed his life, that everything was her fault, that he should never have touched her. Lady Mei Yun aged decades in a few years. Her beauty withered. Her spirit broke. She lived in that deteriorating estate like a ghost, caring for a child that everyone knew was illegitimate, a living reminder of the scandal that had destroyed an entire family. Their son grew up knowing he was the bastard whose very existence had ruined everything. The other children taunted him. Adults whispered when he passed. He would carry that shame his entire life. The great love story that had supposedly justified everything, the passion so strong it overcame social conventions and moral restrictions, had curdled into bitter hatred. Chen Wei Long and Lady Mei Yun were trapped together in poverty and mutual loathing, bound by the child they'd created and the choices they'd made. Their romance had become the capital's favorite cautionary tale, whispered in every household as a warning about the consequences of adultery and moral corruption. One quiet evening, about 3 years after my wedding, I sat at my dressing table removing the day's jewelry and ornaments. Zhao Muchen entered our chambers and came to stand behind me, his hands resting gently on my shoulders. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly, meeting my eyes in the mirror. I looked at my reflection. I was now 23 years old. My features were the same as they'd been that morning when Xiaoyu had burst in with news of Chen Wei Long's betrayal, but my expression was different. Calmer. Sharper. More confident. "Just remembering," I said quietly. "Do you ever regret it?" Zhao Muchen asked. "What you did that day? How completely you destroyed them." In private, people say the Shen family's revenge was brutal, excessive, that we could have handled it more quietly. I turned to face him directly. Not for a single moment. If I could do it all over again, I would be even more ruthless, even more thorough, even more public about exposing their crimes. His eyebrows rose slightly. Even more? Yes. My voice was firm, absolute. Because I learned something important that day, something I'll never forget. Against wolves who want to devour you, tears and pleas are worthless. Weakness invites more abuse. Mercy is mistaken for cowardice. I stood, facing him fully. The only way to deal with people who would destroy you is to become more fierce than they are. You must strike first, strike hard, and strike so thoroughly that they can never recover enough to threaten you again. Zhao Muchen was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Then, slowly, he smiled. "That's exactly why I agreed to marry you when my father suggested the match. Not despite your ruthlessness, but because of it. Not despite what you did to the Chen family, but because you had the courage and intelligence to do it." He took my hand, holding it gently. "Most women in your position would have cried, would have accepted the humiliation, would have tried to endure and hope for better treatment in the future. But you refused to be a victim. You turned the tables completely. You took control of your own fate." His expression grew more serious. "That kind of strength, that kind of will, that's what I want in a partner. That's what I want in the mother of my children. Someone who will fight for what's right, who won't accept injustice, who knows how to protect our family." I felt something warm spread through my chest. This was why our marriage worked. He understood me. He valued the qualities that others found frightening or improper. "The Chen family made a fatal mistake," I said quietly. "They assumed I was weak because I was a woman, because I was young, because I'd been raised to be gentle and obedient. They thought they could manipulate me, humiliate me, force me to accept whatever they decided." I smiled, and it wasn't a gentle expression. They forgot that even the gentlest person, when cornered and disrespected, can become the most dangerous enemy. They forgot that someone with nothing left to lose has infinite power. Outside our windows, the moon hung full and bright in a clear sky. In the nursery down the hall, our son slept peacefully, watched over by attentive nurses. Throughout the estate, servants moved quietly through their evening duties. Everything was ordered, peaceful, prosperous. This was the life I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. This was what I'd won by refusing to be a victim. The people who'd tried to destroy me were rotting in poverty and shame, exactly as they deserved. The man who'd betrayed me was a drunken wreck. The woman who'd stolen him was a broken ghost. Their bastard child would carry the stain of his conception forever. And me? I was thriving. I had a husband who respected me, a son who would inherit 2 great family fortunes, a position in society that was unassailable, and the satisfaction of knowing that I'd taken control of my own destiny. I've never pretended to be a good person in the conventional sense. I'm not endlessly forgiving. I'm not infinitely patient. I don't turn the other cheek when someone strikes me. But I am fair in my own way. Treat me with respect, and I'll return it tenfold. Support me, and I'll support you. Honor me, and I'll honor you. But wrong me, betray me, try to humiliate me or mine. Then you'll learn exactly how fierce I can become. You'll discover that the gentle lady has claws sharper than any blade. You'll understand, far too late, that I am not prey, I am the hunter. My life is written by my own hand, and anyone foolish enough to try to deface my story will find themselves erased from existence instead. That's not cruelty. That's justice. That's survival. That's the only way to live in a world where women are expected to endure anything and smile while doing it. I refuse to endure. I refuse to smile through pain. I refuse to be a victim. And that refusal, that single choice to fight back with everything I had, made all the difference. The Chen family learned that lesson far too late. But they learned it thoroughly. And their ruin stands as a permanent warning to anyone else who might think the Chen family, or Shen Linyu specifically, is someone they can treat with contempt. We are not. If this story of refusing to be a victim resonated with you, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below telling me what you would have done in Linyu's position. Would you have handled it differently? And if you enjoyed this story of turning betrayal into triumph, check out my channel for more stories about people who took control of their own destinies and refused to accept injustice. Your support means everything, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, remember, never let anyone write your story for you.